Hello and welcome to another episode of Brand Retro. Today on the podcast we have Emma Donovan from South Africa, Cape Town, South Africa. So Emma, welcome.
Thank you, Mike. It's great to be here.
Yeah, so Emma's here today, and Emma, thank you for being on the podcast. We want to talk about your company Dapper, and we want to talk about branding, and we want to talk about kind of your approach and kind of how, kind of that branding process and that authenticity kind of starts from a personal place. It starts from within. So with that, I'm going to let you kind of give me your philosophy on that, and we'll just kind of ride this conversation.
Yeah, so our thinking with Dapper was to kind of flip branding on its head and look at the founder rather than the company brand as a starting point. They're so intricately linked, but often the founder's brand is played a huge influence in how a company brand shows up. But for us, it goes beyond companies because we believe everyone has a brand. It's just whether you choose to own the story. So it's really looking at people from all walks of life, careers, whether they're working or not, and just helping them really craft that narrative so that it feels authentic and that they can leverage it for whatever they've got coming up next. And I think a big part of it is redefining what success looks like. I think it's very easy to let other people or kind of trends influence what success means, but really having that more personalized approach for us is very linked to building the brand.
Yeah, I totally agree. And then just for the sake of reference, I wanted you to say it first. I wanted you to kick this off because I didn't want, if anybody who's listening to this podcast knows kind of my philosophy and my approach to things, it's very similar to what you just described. And I wanted you to be able to say it first. But my response to that is, I completely agree. I think what most people neglect or forget to inject into their brand is this personal point of view. Maybe it's a core values thing, maybe it's but so much of, the brand itself needs to be derived from the person who kind of hatched the idea and the person who's trying to cultivate that business. And it's not necessarily that it has to be about that person per se, but there's an inherent consistency and an inherent kind of cultural aspect that goes into it because the person who's creating it did it for a reason. They have experiences, they have, maybe some deal breakers, maybe some things that excite them, maybe some things that, don't fit in the business, but all of those ingredients are a recipe in this whole process. And I think it's important for the owner of the business and the cultivator of that brand to kind of accept the fact that they need to be inside that brand as well. Do you agree?
Absolutely. And I love the word cultivator there. One of our values is to cultivate joy. And that's within the company, but also for our clients. Because again, if you've got that like authentic energy coming through, then hopefully there is joy. There's a kind of natural ease, a kind of being comfortable in your skin, but in a way that is energizing. And that for me is incredible when you can help someone find that purpose that has that positive energy cultivated.
Yeah, I really appreciate that response. And I think what I like about that, or at least where my mind goes in this whole process, is that I think when people put themselves inside the brand, there's an inherent a confidence or a swagger that comes with it. So when tough times happen and business decisions need to be made, or for whatever reason the business evolves in a certain way, I think having that center point and being able to come back to who you are as a person, because you're inside that brand, it's a nice compass of direction to come back to. And I think even on top of that, what most people don't even realize is when they're inside that brand and they're a major component of what that brand represents and kind of the recipe that goes into that brand, there's an inherent swagger and a confidence that comes with it too. So like when you meet these people and they have a confidence about their brand and they seem to be very in touch with what that brand is, what it's all about, and what it represents, 9 times out of 10, that's because they're inside that brand and they've accepted the fact that that's okay. I think sometimes people confuse logo with brand and they feel like this separation thing is kind of part of the process. And it doesn't need to be. you're actually giving up a large piece of leverage from a business perspective by not embracing yourself inside that brand. So with that said, what are your thoughts, and how do you break that down for clients when they come to you?
Yeah, I'll answer that. I just wanted to comment on the kind of swagger and the confidence because I think that was a big part of the story behind the name Dapper. We really wanted people to have like a quiet confidence, something that is internal, that comes across not in a way that's arrogant. So to keep that humility in the brand, but just have that like spring in their step, slight swagger because of the like confidence that they're sharing, and it's around not seeing people as competition, but rather like competing against yourself, or that collaborative mindset. So I just thought I would share that because it was very relevant to what you were saying. But in terms of how we get people there, it's such an interesting question. It's been a work in progress. We currently have sort of two very distinct offerings. One is a 6 month process. That's my favorite. We call it the Dapper 9 because clients literally go the whole 9 yards with us. And there's a real mix of self-discovery and personal brand. And we've shifted the lens from saying personal brand to professional brand because we really want that consistency with who you are in your private life versus your work life. So a kind of professional brand that is consistent throughout. And then from that process, we've actually developed a 3 month online course because we really want this to be accessible to everyone globally. And we obviously have time as a constraint on our more consulting style product. So that is exciting for me because it's a way to take what we've learned and all the feedback we've had from clients and really package it into something that is online but interactive. It's giving you space to really figure that brand out kind of at your own pace, which is
Yeah,
exciting.
the one thing I would add there, and you kind of touched on it, is that I think it's not completely unique, but I think for the clients and for the customers, it's an abstract idea.
Yeah,
Um, you kind of have to drag them through the process a little bit and help them hopefully get to a place where they not only accept it, but they understand why them being a major component of the brand is a benefit. Can you talk to me a little bit more about that and how you kind of paint them that picture? Because for me, like, we have a lot of discussions like that with our clients and why it's important. And some of them take it way too literally, like they think their face is going to be the logo. And then some people just don't take it literal enough. And, what we try to explain to them is that there can be subtle components, that it could be a nod to a color, it could be like we're just looking at all the little details, and how do we, as much as we can, align these with the person and the kind of the manufacturer of the brand behind the scenes, the business owner.
yeah,
And what I want them to understand is not only, like we mentioned and talked about, do you get that swagger, that confidence, that kind of a thing, but you also have a story that goes with it. And a lot of times that story, that's your that's your opener. That's your first impression. That's your ability to be able to come in and speak to something uniquely and be able to kind of have something that's very close to you, which then, in my opinion, changes the whole game from a competition standpoint as well.
it
So just to
does.
put a little context to that, we have clients that uh, they just look at their neighbors, they look at the competition, and they think, because they're like X, Y, and Z, I need to probably look just like that, or I need to compete at that level. And our argument is always like, well, you don't want to look like them, because then it's white noise. Then you're birds of a feather and you're just not going to stand out the way you should. Where if you can build this brand around who you are and your uniqueness to some degree, you don't have to worry about the competition because you're unique to yourself.
Absolutely. And I think that going back to your question of how do you get people to see that value or buy into it, two comments to make. One is we never want to be a grudge purchase. So most of our clients already have some understanding of how powerful brand can be. They're just not sure how to do it. So that always excites me. And another one is that I love getting people to realize that their story has so much value to add. So one of the more practical exercises we do with clients is help them figure out what are their core content pillars. And for us, that are sort of topics you can talk about that are area of expertise, you're interested in them, and they add value to your audience. And getting a client to talk beyond just their role or their industry and really bringing that storytelling piece in, I think is an exciting way to bring that to life. And it goes hand in hand with figuring out your brand tone, which is tricky. And it's really tricky when you have co-founders in a business and they each have their own unique tone, but they need to kind of settle on what is the company brand tone. So that's one of my favorite kind of things to workshop is we don't want someone to look at a website and go, oh, that founder wrote that section and that one is that. How do you get that like alignment and synergy with the authenticity piece staying intact? So a challenging one, but yeah, something we really enjoy sort of collaborating with clients. And again, that's very much the approach of we don't have the answers, they have them. It's almost a coaching approach. It's how do we draw it out, get them to see it in a different way and kind of get excited about it rather than feeling daunted or I don't have a story to share.
Yeah. Extracting it from them is a challenge, but it's a major part of the process. That
Yeah.
said, how do you make them, or not make them, but how do you help them accept it? Because, like, I'll give you an example. We have clients where when we extract those pieces, right? We say, these are the pieces that are your kind of your brand pillars and they're very unique and direct to you. And when you go out and do what you do, these things are going to be the most obvious that stand out to people, direct back to your brand, all these different things. And sometimes they're not self-aware enough or they haven't accepted some of these things about themselves. And they're like, well, I'm not like that, or I don't want to be that. And we're trying to cultivate these things. We're trying to help them accept these things. And then we're trying to get them to celebrate these things. So it's kind of a process of helping them realize, helping them accept, and helping them celebrate. And it could, for us, like, I don't know how far you go with it. I'll let you speak to that. But for us, it's everything down to how you talk, how you dress. Like, as much as you can come through this process and be authentic and consistent to what the brand or the business side is about, just embrace it. I actually work with a gal whose her thing is she wears hats. She wears like these, I don't even know what you'd call them, but they're like fashion type hats. And she has kind of become known as she's the hat lady. She's the word, and she's like, is that good though? Do I want to be known as the hat lady? And I'm like, as long as they remember you, if they're giving you that moniker and you're able to ride that train and become known because of it, and it's your thing anyway, I would completely embrace it and steer into it. So that said, how do you help clients kind of accept that piece? Because it is, for them, it's different, right? For us, it's, we see the results and we encourage them to do it. So it's a little bit steeped on our side as far as like the leverage piece, but for them, it's abstract. It's like, why would I do this? So I'll shut up.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
I can resonate. I've had a similar challenge. I think it's one of the reasons we've made our flagship process 6 months, because the sort of volume of work that needed to be done, I thought was a 3 month process. But what I've realized is you need breathing space, you need time to reflect. And we also acknowledge that the work we do is important, not urgent. And when you're running a business, they're going to be urgent things and they're going to step in. And I used to find it frustrating if a client pushed out a meeting, and now I go, you go do your thing so that when you see me, you can focus and you can be present. So that holding space piece I find really works. And then one of my favorite kind of ways to get them to like embrace it, that celebrating piece, is to talk about the ripple effect that a strong brand can have. So you can inspire your team, you can build credibility for clients, you can, attract investors, like whatever your goal is, it's understanding what impact that ripple effect can have. And they need to be able to articulate that. So I can give them the framework and say, this is where the ripple effect could take place, but get them to put numbers to that or whatever's going to get them excited. But to say, okay, if that ripple effect impacts my team and they each can impact another 10 people, what is that gonna look like? So that's often a way to get them to see they're shining the light on others as well as leaning into their own brand.
So how do you coach them on kind of keeping their eyes peeled and ears sharp, listening for those kind of affirmations, so to speak? I'll give you an example. Like, we have clients where we walk them through this process and we teach them how to do this, and we, reluctantly they go into this and go, well, okay, if you say so. And it isn't until they start to get the comments, sometimes from the clients, sometimes from just observers, but or prospects or whatever. But somebody will say, hey, I've really noticed in the last 30 days, you've really dialed this in, or, oh my God, I love X, Y, and Z. And it's funny how quickly the audience will, because it does this, because these things connect, it'll click to them quite, quickly. And when that feedback starts to come to the client, they just buy in. They go all in, and they're like, oh my God, I got this comment. And all of a sudden it starts to click for them. So how
Yeah.
do you help them kind of become aware and watch for those things and listen for those
Mm.
kinds of things?
So we take it one step further and actually ask them to go and get feedback. So quite early on in our process, they need to ask three people from different aspects of their lives. What are they, the people giving the feedback? What do they admire about the person? What do they feel their blind spots are? And what do they think their superpower is? So very simple questions, but not things you would walk up to a friend or business partner and say, what's my blind spot? I mean, you should, we all should, but it's not something that's top of mind. So by doing that early in the process, we can weave that in, help them work on their blind spots, but also importantly, lean into what they're good at. On a more sort of, I guess, public way, we ask them to get LinkedIn recommendations. So again, asking for that affirmation, but from people that are going to give it authentically. And then also saying, what are the kind of responses you would like? So one of our clients really didn't leverage LinkedIn at all for her brand. And when she started putting out thought leadership content, she got a sales lead in the first week. That wasn't one of our goals, but it was a huge affirmation. And another example was a client who very experienced, knowledgeable in his industry, but had never put himself out there. And about a month after he started creating content, he got invited to speak on a panel at a national conference, a massive event. And so they were just lovely examples of not necessarily what either client was going out for specifically, but that kind of ripple effect of the affirmation they got. And not just affirmation, but opportunity. So I think it's getting them past that first hurdle of,
Yeah.
is this a good use of my time? Does anyone care? What am I, why am I doing this? It's like once you can get them over that initial hurdle, and that's a lot of, I guess, just support and encouragement to get them to do that, and accountability. And then it's just, one of the guys I work with a lot always says, get out of the way of abundance. And I love that because it's the opportunities are there. It's just, are you going to embrace them?
And why do you, I mean, I have my own theories, but why do you think that is, that it is a hurdle? Why do you think it is something that people have to almost be coaxed into? Because I understand it's a little abstract and not everybody thinks like marketers, but I think there's a pattern there, as
Mm.
in
Yeah.
business, where most people want to not reject it, but they're reluctant to buy in. Why do you
Mm.
think that is?
So two things come up for me. I'm very curious to hear your side of it as well. But for me, imposter syndrome is a huge thing for really established professionals, incredible leaders. It shows up all the time with our clients. I now actually look for it rather than being surprised by it. And I think the other is there's so much pressure to be using time efficiently, to be productive, to be achieving. And working on your brand is a much kind of softer side to it. It's the long game, it's brand awareness, it is relationship building, it's connecting, which for me should be right up there with the productivity and the result side. But unfortunately, they often get kind of pushed to the side as people are focusing on scaling or whatever it might be. But yeah, what are your thoughts and what would you add to that?
I agree with you. I think imposter syndrome is a huge one. Not necessarily that maybe they don't even think they have imposter syndrome, but because we're all tough on ourselves, we're all like, I just don't think that they allow themselves to go there.
Mm.
And I would say the other big one for me is kind of this monkey see, monkey do type approach
Yeah.
where you see something on TV or you see some YouTube influencer, you see something where you're just like, well, that guy clearly has it figured out. So I'm just going to jet down that road, or maybe it's a book I read or whatever. But you're trying to adopt somebody else's recipe for success. And I'm not saying you can't pull pieces, find influence, like, but the reason why that recipe for success worked for that guy or gal is because they built it around themselves and they found a way to leverage their superpower, their skills.
Mm.
So they made it look easy
Yeah.
because they leveraged themselves and found their path. And I think that's the lesson, is like anybody who's, if you're studying a Gary Vee or you're studying a Seth Godin or anything like that, you got to be able to kind of deconstruct it and figure out which parts apply to you and how you create your own version of that. Because if you can cultivate your own path, you've got leverage beyond the competition, and you've got a way to kind of do that faster and do that from a very authentic place. Like you said, that one client who saw success early and all of a sudden they got booked on a main stage at a conference or whatever. It probably came so naturally and so quickly because he was just embracing his superpower,
Yeah.
and it changes everything. And again, I'm a huge reader and all these different things, but I think it's important for people to not just buy into somebody else's recipe, study it, extract it, but manipulate it to fit you.
Absolutely. I made the mistake of trying to take something too literally when I joined the Entrepreneurs Organization Accelerator program, and we were given the scaling up book. And I remember going to my business partner and I was like, we need to do everything in this book. And she was like, no, we really don't. And it was just such a lovely reminder of like, our business wasn't at the size where a lot of the things were even relevant. But I think you get caught up and excited when something is seen as a credible source or an influential person. And it's
Yep.
very easy to, yeah, just take it on and go, let's do this, rather than what's the lesson and how do I apply it?
And yeah, full transparency, I'm guilty of doing it too. But I think what I've learned in the process too is that if you don't break it down and kind of deconstruct it in a way, you can disrupt the business by doing that. So
Yeah,
if you're trying to shoehorn in things that just don't apply to your business because chapter 5 said I should, that's not how it works. So you have to kind of have that awareness to manipulate it to some degree to make sure it benefits you and doesn't hurt you.
and I think have the confidence to realize that what you've tried might not work and you can try something else. So to not
Exactly.
feel too stuck in a direction or in a process, to have that like flexibility to own your mistakes, learn from them, and kind of change tact.
Yeah. And it doesn't make that book wrong either.
No,
Like if I can only apply 5 out of the 10 chapters, it doesn't make the other chapters garbage. It just means they don't apply for me at the moment. So,
yeah,
you can still use that book to your advantage. But I think what's great about this and kind of where you guys are going with Dapper is, I think it's an untapped area of marketing. And I think obviously we're doing it, you're doing it. There's people that are starting to adopt this concept and this mindset and help these clients and customers through it. But by and large, I don't see most large agencies doing it at this level. And I just think it's a simple concept. I think it's important, and I think it's a very kind of authentic way to guide these customers, because even when and if they were to move on from companies like ours, they didn't lose the work, you know what I mean? And I think that's a fear of mine, is I hate to see clients go backwards. I
yeah.
just like to see them go forwards, and I feel like the work that we're doing and the work that like Dapper's providing them only propels them forward, whether they stay with us or not.
Absolutely. It's that foundational piece. I always say brand comes before marketing. And if you get it right, everything else will flow.
Totally agree. So Emma, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Tell us a little bit about where where we can find more information about Dapper and, kind of where we can follow you guys.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, so becomedapper.com is probably the easiest. Also happy to share a link specifically for your readers for the show notes. And I said readers, listeners, and watchers. And always happy to connect directly on LinkedIn. So you can find me at Emma Donovan-Dapper. We'd love to connect and take the conversation further.
Thank you so much, Emma. If you'd like to learn more about CyberDogs, share your thoughts, or even ask a specific question about this episode or the brand retro mindset, contact me directly at mike@cyberdogsmarketing.com.